Ladies and gentlemen, you are locked in with a Fantasy and Frames megasode between Shoot the Gap and Fourth and Frames tonight. We're coming in both guns blazing to shoot the frames as we talk through a 2025 NFL mock draft and give you fantasy analysis for both the offensive and defensive side of the ball while we predict the first round of the NFL draft for you, which takes place tomorrow night. So we got Shoot the Gap, we got Fourth and Frames, and ladies and gentlemen, as always, let's get it popping.
But wait, there's more.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
And ladies and gentlemen, we could not be anywhere without you guys as we welcome you in to this matchup between Fourth and Frames and Shoot the Gap. Once again, we're calling it Shoot the Frames. And we got four of us here tonight. I'm Rhett Manuel. We have Nate Markham. We have Drew Scott. We have Aiden Weingartner. And we have the boss man himself, the overall sensation, Jorge Edwards, in the building. As we're going to go through this first round of the NFL draft, guys. But before we do that, always remember to like, subscribe, and review to catch anytime a new podcast or short drops from us here at Fantasy and Frames. You can also search for any of the podcasts here at Fantasy and Frames by name, wherever you listen to podcasts. And for us and for Shoot the Gap, make sure to subscribe to the Fourth and Frames podcast and the Shoot the Gap podcast. And don't forget to lock in as well with us at Fantasy and Frames. We're giving you that latest good, whether it be weekly rankings, IDP rankings, Dynasty, the latest articles, the latest takes, the latest news and notes. We've got it all on lock. So very quickly, let's talk to everybody very quickly. We got a lot to get through tonight. Nate, how are you, man?
Doing great. It is the it's kind of the, I don't know what the hype. It's all this buildup and everything that we want, like the letdown of the season for me, at least after the Super Bowl, of course, was a little bit of a hangover, and not a good hangover, the bad one where you're on the toilet the entire time and everything's too loud. But everything's quieted down just a little bit, and I plan to get loud again tomorrow, finally, when it's, dreams made.
I'm doing great, man. It's NFL Draft Eve. I'm going to put on my jammies tonight, turn on draft day, and go night and get out my Post-it notes for tomorrow.
Aiden?
So I'm very, very excited to be here. But Drew was talking about draft day, and unfortunately, another year went by, and then I forgot about it again. So whatever.
It's not too late. It's on Netflix.
It's not too late.
I know it's on
hours.
Anyway, I might watch it during the day tomorrow. Anyway,
there you go.
I'm very excited to complete one final mock draft for you guys to close it all out. It feels like every January, it's so far away, this and that, and it's here. And then we fast forward the last few days of the week. So I'm very excited to close it all out with one final mock draft.
And Jamie, welcome in as always, man. We appreciate you asking. Are any of us streaming tomorrow night? I'm so glad you asked because Fantasy and Frames will be streaming live during the first round of the NFL draft tomorrow night. And I believe day 2 as well, right, Jorge?
That is correct. We got the stew with JT Brew and Justin Taylor, aka at JT Orange on X. His show is now on the network for Fantasy and Frames, and he's going to be hosting the NFL draft on his show, The Stew with JT Brew, and it is going to be something, folks.
So, it is going to be electric, but not as electric as you look, Jorge, in these overalls. So I know we're feeling cozy, but how are we feeling tonight about this mock draft?
There's just so much to process between now and tomorrow night. You mentioned, first of all, going back to the movie Draft Day. I've been up since 3. I don't know how I'm functioning right now. And I think I still need to watch the movie Draft Day. I may not sleep until after round 1 of the NFL draft tomorrow. So the next 2 days are going to be pretty hardcore, but this is what you live for. This is what you look forward to. This is one of the biggest unifying days of the year, or tomorrow, I should say, is when you get to the NFL draft. Everybody, all the teams are represented. You hope. And it's just going to be a great time. But I'm looking forward to this mock draft. This was actually a fun one, a tough one, but a fun one that we all did together. And I'm looking forward to sharing the results with everybody who's watching.
Yeah,
you used the word electric, which is the opposite of the way he looks. He looks Amish, and I'm thinking it's the lack of electricity. Make me a chair, Jorge, and then I can rock in it and watch Draft Day.
Good one.
So before we get into this mock draft, we haven't really had any real news in the NFL. So we're going to jump into that, but not before we shout out the good folks at Dynasty Decks. The NFL draft is tomorrow night, which means we are one step closer to winning those fantasy football championships, locking in those awards. And what better way to capture that immortality than getting your very own Dynasty Deck championship plaque, ladies and gentlemen. So Dynasty Deck or thedynastydex.com. They provide the best in the business. Those fully customizable championship plaques for any type of fantasy football league, whether it's offense, whether it's IDP, whether it's best ball, it doesn't really matter. They've got you, and all you've got to do is use the promo code FRAMES and receive $5 off of your purchase price, which is extremely affordable compared to any other market prices you're going to see. So head over to the Dynasty Decks today, get locked in, get that award for your next season's fantasy football, because right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hand out some awards. We're going to hand out some draft picks as we go through what we think would be an awfully fun first round of the NFL draft. So what we're going to do is we're going to use PFF's mock draft simulator, and we kind of done this ahead of time, but you know what? We're going to go ahead and talk through this piece by piece, one by one. And what better place to start with a draft than at the very top, where our man, the new kid on the block, he has the right stuff. Aiden Weingartner was at the top of the board with the Tennessee Titans and that first overall pick. So Aiden, probably no shock here, but who did you take for the Tennessee Titans at the top of the board?
Thanks for the theme music. Very, very bold take here. Cam Ward, QB Miami. We've known this for the better part of the last 2 to 3 months. I feel like this is just another one of those like past years. Lock it in, one of those really chalky first overall picks. It would be a shot. While Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter and Ashton Jant are all like probably better overall prospects on many big boards, like Will Levis can't work in this timing-based offense. You can't. I don't even know who else is in the QB room. It doesn't even matter because Cam Moore is coming to town to support Calvin Ridley and company. Maybe they get some receivers later, but Cam Moore, just from a fantasy perspective, redraft perspective here, he provides elite fantasy. Maybe it's this bold at back-end QB1 finish, just like Jaden Daniels rookie year, because Ward provides an elite rushing ceiling. Just put my 2 cents in there. But, yeah, chalky pick, Cam Ward.
Drew, I'm going to go ahead and ask you right away. Is Cam Ward the right pick considering all the needs Titans have?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, among all the needs they have, the quarterback is still the most important position in football. And I think Cam Ward is worthy of being the number 1 pick. So you have a need a quarterback. You have a quarterback that, in my mind, is good enough to be considered to be the number 1 pick. So, yeah, I absolutely think that it's the right move.
And we're going to go ahead and get to this comment from the Roll 07. Thanks for joining us, buddy. He says that his league does their draft right before the NFL draft. So they are drafting players without teams. That sounds fun. What are you guys' thoughts on it? Go ahead, Nate. Tell us what you think of what seems like an outlandish idea, but might actually be fun at the same time.
It is an outlandish idea, but I think that's what makes leagues fun is outlandish. I mean, get outside the box. It does. Obviously, it doesn't give you the best opportunity to make the most educated decision. But at the end of the day, I think that we all are privy to the exact same knowledge. If you do the research and you think that a player is going to land at a specific spot, go for it. I have no problem with crazy rules or crazy situations because everybody has to adhere to them. It's not like anybody has any more of an advantage. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree.
So Cam Ward goes off of the board at the top for the Tennessee Titans. Drew, you are on the clock for the Cleveland Browns. Probably not another shock right here with the second overall pick. There's been a lot of smoke around this pick, but who are you going to go ahead and have the Browns take at second overall?
Before I do that, I just want to give a shout out real quick to Outer Rhythm. He was quick in the comments asking if we needed anybody to join the mock to help out, but then realized this was not the mock that he thought that we were doing. Nonetheless, Outer Rhythm, we do a lot of fantasy football mock drafts on this channel, and we do need help whenever we do those. So it might not be the case today, but we do that often, and we appreciate you offering. And I can guarantee you we'll need to take you up on that in the future. So we appreciate you for that. But number 2 overall, this one is also pretty simple to me, and it's going to be Travis Hunter, wide receiver / corner out of Colorado. I want to put the wide receiver first. I believe he should be a wide receiver first in the NFL. I think that's where his skills would shine the most. And I don't know if it's just coach speak or GM speak, rather, or whatever the case may be, but the Browns have said that they believe that he's a wide receiver first, and I think that's how they're going to deploy him if they do end up selecting him here like I think they will. And I guess I should also give this disclaimer at the top. This is what we think NFL teams will do, not what we think NFL teams should do. There is a very distinct difference. So just putting that out there. But I think Travis Hunter goes number 2 overall to Cleveland. And if we do get the clarity that he is going to be a wide receiver first, he's my wide receiver 1 in this class.
Yeah. Did anybody? I thought I saw a tweet toward the end of last week where they were talking about Travis Hunter's prospect profile as a wide receiver, where his prospect score would possibly be better than Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.'s prospect scores would have been last year had he actually be classified as a wide receiver, not have the cornerback caveat.
I don't know if it would have been better than. I'd have to look back and see what I had. I don't know if it would be better than Neighbors, but I mean it is a good profile. He's got decent size. He's a little bit down on the weight, but he's got a good breakout age, around 19 years old. He's got a career yards per route run at 2.39, which is really solid. He's got a career first downs per route run of 0.108, which is really good. So, I mean, he does have a really good profile. And if you looked at his reception perception profile that Matt Harmon puts together, it was all green lights. So, I mean, and I haven't been doing the whole prospect evaluation for an extremely long time, but in the time I've been doing it, I don't know if I've ever seen a receiver with better body control. So I think that he would be a great receiver. I think he's a solid cornerback too, but I think he would be a great receiver.
Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna go ahead and keep it moving to the New York Giants with a 3rd overall pick and Jorge Edwards, the man himself, on the clock. Jorge, who do you have the Giants taking in this situation?
I know this is pretty chalk, but I'm going Abdul Carter, edge rusher out of Penn State. There are a couple of things here. I think the Giants need to really build upon what they did last year, first with facilitating the trade for Brian Burns from Carolina. Yes, they have Kayvon Thibodeau, but Kayvon Thibodeau is entering his final year of his rookie deal. He's not been horrible, but he's not been great. And so if there was an opportunity to move on from him, I think this would be that opportunity with, upgrading with Abdul Carter and having Brian Burns on the other side. Maybe he could be used as trade bait during the draft. Maybe he'll be unhappy because they drafted Abdul Carter. If you look at Abdul Carter per PFF in the top 5 this past year among draft eligible edge rushers in sacks, pressures, pass rush, win rates. It just makes too much sense, and it's too much of an upgrade along the defensive end position for the New York Giants to pass up on. If I don't, with the quarterback room as it is, yes, I can understand somebody making the argument like, well, Shador should go there, but there's a lot of uncertainty with that pick. I don't think there's any uncertainty with how good Abdul Carter affects the NFL.
I think here's crazy statement possibly is that I think they're going to be very happy in the long run that they actually did beat the Bills in week 17, and when they were vying and jockeying for that first pick overall, because I think Abdul Carter's going to be a better long-term pick than what Cam Ward would have been for them if they had the number 1 pick at quarterback. That's my 2 cents. I'm just not as big on the quarterback class.
That was the Patriots.
Was it the Patriots?
That beat the Bills week 18.
The Giants did win 2 games toward the end of the year to blow their chance to number 1, though. You're on the right thought process.
You were correct. Yes.
I was confused when he was talking. No.
But
I have no idea what the teams were, but the Giants were on the right track to the number 1 pick.
Who did
okay.
They won their way out of it, but I don't remember who they beat.
Right.
Oh, the Saints or something.
Probably.
No, it was a good team. It was a team that they shouldn't have beat. Sorry, Rat.
A good team.
So no,
it was a good team.
We're all good, guys, but we're going to go ahead and keep it moving because there was a perfect segue to that 4th overall pick, barring any draft hijinks tomorrow night, which we are hearing are possibilities concerning the Patriots and the Chicago Bears concerning the pick of a certain running back. I'm sure we'll talk about very shortly. There are no trades involved tonight. So, Nate, knowing that we don't have a trade in the cards, who do you have the Patriots taking with your 4th overall pick?
Yeah, you did say running back. Of course, that's an area that if you're the Patriots, you would love to have that opportunity to turn that card in. But at the end of the day, I think this Mike Vrabel-led team is going to look at shoring up that left tackle spot. Vidarian Lowe is not the answer long term if you want to keep Drake May upright. And the answer to that is Will Campbell out of LSU. He's obviously facing a little bit of scrutiny for the arm length. Well, here's the thing. Look, NFL scouting combine, 32 and 5/8 inches. Pro day, 33 inches. So his arms are still growing. So clearly by the time the NFL comes around, he's going to be at the 34, 35. Fact of the matter is this.
Right.
Yes. You're going to be extendo man by his second year.
Exactly. Go gadget.
36 arm.
The arm length does. There is a correlation between arm length and long, ideal tackle, but it can be offset by good technique and IQ, et cetera. And I think Will Campbell has all those factors, and they need someone to protect Drake May at least if they're going to get the most production. Guys, fantasy question as a result. Will Campbell might not be a fantasy relevant pick, but which wide receiver do we think that with the added time is going to move up? Is that Stephon Diggs becomes relevant? Is that, is Pop Douglas or any of the other?
It's going to be whichever receiver they draft in the 2nd round.
Yeah, none of the options now.
There you go. Exactly. That's the exact answer I was hoping you guys were going to say, because I don't think it's great, but it's great for the team. Maybe not necessarily fantasy.
Yeah, it's great for Drake May for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Will Campbell with that 4th overall pick. We move over to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 5th overall pick, a place where you have a team that has a lot of needs, a lot of places you can go. I just thought that going wide receiver at this point, going tight end, going safety was a little bit early. So I went with the defensive interior, and I'm going to take Mason Graham out of Michigan with this 5th overall pick for the Jaguars. And here's why. I mean, we've seen it for years that if you have someone who is a disruptor like Mason Graham, who's a big motor player, great combination of strength and quickness, just the type of guy where if you happen to play in an IDP league that has defensive interior specific eligibility, this is one of those types of players that you're going to want to have in an IDP roster. I think he's disruptive. I think he's a day one force. I think this is a guy that we don't know. We don't really know what the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to do heading into this draft. That being said, knowing that they have so many holes, finding one of the safer players in the draft to fill in one of those holes, probably not a very bad proposition for the Jags.
Yeah, their run defense fucking stunk last year too. So Lord knows they need some help. But Out of Rhythm brings up a valid question that I think we need to talk about with the Jags, because they have been rumor central this week. I mean, they're in on Ashton Genty, they're in on Ted McMillan, they're in on Tyler Warren, they're in on everybody but this guy that, for up until like 3 days ago, Mason Graham was the consensus pick here, but now it's just kind of all over the place. So do any of you guys buy any of the smoke that they could be in on an offensive skill player at number 5 overall, or is it just draft week smoke?
I do. It's Liam Cohen, so I definitely think it's something to think about.
Yeah.
I feel like there could have been some validity to this. But when I started hearing reports where they're like, we think Genty is the missing piece to the offense, I'm like, you got some more pieces you got to fill in there, buddy, before you have to worry getting an elite running back to round out your offense. I agree. The defense was just atrocious last year. The interior was atrocious. I mean, this is one of those things where it's the best player available for one of the biggest needs on the team.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. So speaking of places where we've had rumors of Ashton Jeanty going to the Las Vegas Raiders, Aiden, I got it right this time. 6th overall pick. I don't think you're going to shock anybody with where you're going in this situation, Aiden, because I think you're going the obvious direction that everyone has had the Raiders going this entire time.
Ashton Gianti, welcome to Las Vegas. Running back Boise State. Let me give you 2 things here. 1, this is Pete Carroll. We all know he loves to run the football. This is a perfect fit. Number 2, let me read you these names. Raheem Mostert, Sincere McCormick, Zamir White, and Dylan Laube. That right there is the exact reason why the Raiders need to draft Ashton Gianti. I rest my case. End of that.
The Dylan Laube disrespect in this room is unbelievable.
He got 1 carry and fumbled, and they never saw the field.
You know what, Aiden? It's fine. We're just going to go ahead and keep it moving. I don't think anybody is going to disagree that Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders would be a bad pick in this situation. I think it's probably there are a few spots in this draft where I think running back is an absolute need where guys would have immediate value. I think Vegas is one of those places. Chicago is one of those places. Dallas is one of those places. And Denver is one of those places. So if you have any of these high upside running backs going to any of those 4 spots, I think you're probably going to see them either A, maintain value, i.e. like an Ashton Jeanty would, because he's seen as the 101 in these dynasty drafts, or possibly pick up some value if any of these other 2nd, 3rd tier running backs falls to one of these places. Anybody disagree?
No. I think I agree.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and keep it moving to the number 7 overall pick. Drew, go ahead and tell us what you believe the New York Jets are going to do tomorrow night.
I know Tyler Warren's been a really popular pick here, and I did consider it, but their offensive line needs some help. And if you want Justin Fields to survive at all, like if they care about his well-being whatsoever, then they need to invest in that offensive line. So I went with the tackle from Mizzou, Armand Membu. Most people consider, I'm not an offensive line expert by any means, most people consider him to be the best run blocking tight end in this draft. Lord knows the Jets want to run the ball. Run blocking tight end, run blocking tackle in the draft, and Lord knows the Jets want to run the ball. And depending on who you ask, there's some people I've heard over the last few weeks that think he's the best tackle in the class overall, even Will Campbell. I don't know if I'm really there, but I think at this point, it's a good investment for the Jets if they want to try to get some of that run game back and keep Justin Fields on his feet.
I don't think it's a bad idea to ever take care of your quarterback.
I've got a question for Rat quick.
Okay.
If this happens, Drew just laid out best run blocking tackle by many accounts. I know you don't like Breece Hall's fantasy outlook, so will you be back in if they get a boost in the run game like this?
God, you're really putting me in a bad spot right now because I don't like take lock, but everything I saw out of Breece Hall in the second half of last year, maybe it was offensive line related. Maybe they really were that terrible. Maybe Breece Hall isn't that explosive, but if I have to give you an answer that says if the New York Jets improve their offensive line, do I have to give Breece Hall a little bit of a bump? Then yes, I have to reluctantly. That being said, I'm still probably not taking him where the consensus is right now. I'm still going to wait on value. And if I end up with not any Breece Hall, then I'm okay with that too.
Okay. I was just curious if that would improve.
I mean, kind of. Did it improve
Brett
it?
still hates Breece Hall, confirmed.
Okay. Kind of, but not really.
Let's move to the 8th overall pick in the Carolina Panthers. Jorge, the guy you have in this spot a year ago was seen as the possible top pick in the draft. Had a little bit of a rough season this past year, but here you are. You still have him in the top 10. So tell them who you have and tell them why you have the Carolina Panthers taking who you have them taking.
Sure. So I got James Pierce Jr., edge rusher out of Tennessee. The guy is a model of consistency. You mentioned he had like a down year Well, let's kind of dive into that just a little bit. When looking at edge rushers in the Power 5 in 2024 among draft eligible qualified edge rushers, number 5 in pass rush win rate. Back in 23 in the Power 5, number 2 in pass rush win rate. He had in 2023 46 pressures. Follow that up this past season with 55 pressures. Had 10 sacks in 23. Okay, he had a bad year. He had 8 sacks in 24. He is the edge rusher 7 in this draft class in win rate percentage. We look at the situation here. The Carolina Panthers, they traded away Brian Burns. And who do they have? Per ourlads.com, currently the starting edge rushers for the Carolina Panthers are Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wonnum. And I'm not going to slander players here like Rhett does with Breece Hall.
Naturally.
Because these people will be able to kick my ass if they were ever to watch this. But I will say they are not elite. They're not elite like James Pierce has the potential to be. I think they need to get back on the train of start to assemble more of the elite pieces on this defense. The linebacking core, is it great? No. Is it serviceable? Okay, you got Josie Jewell, you got Christian Roseboom, and I know Nate's going to scoff at that, a little bit, and I don't blame him. But it is an upgrade for what they had last year. They brought in Trayvon Moehrig from the Las Vegas Raiders at safety, who's probably going to play that hybrid linebacker box safety role. So, they're starting to do some stuff, but I think they really need to make a splash move, especially when you have the potential for the Saints drafting a rookie quarterback this year. You have second-year quarterback Michael Penix in Atlanta. I mean, this could be a situation where, Pierce could kind of feast against some of the more inexperienced talent at the quarterback position in the NFC South.
And yeah, I love that take, and I love the research. And you gave all these facts as to why James Pierce is still a potentially elite pass rusher. So the NFL is weird, where sometimes guys just take a dive in terms of their draft stock. It's hard to explain, but I will say this. Before we move into this next pick, if any NFL player wants to find me for any take I might have, I can be found in either St. Louis, Missouri, the state of Kentucky, Washington, D.C., or the fine city of Buffalo. So just for the record. Just for the record.
Well, that was all the places except where you can actually find Rhett, but I'm not gonna leak his address live. But what if Hall gets traded? What would that do to the Jets offense? So Rhett, you're the resident Breece Hall hater. So would the Jets just become a better team because Breece Hall's no longer there?
No, because are we really putting much stock into Braylon Allen and all this stuff? No, we're not. They become a worse team. It becomes a worse run game. We're not saying that Breece Hall is dead. We're just saying Breece Hall isn't for me. And you know what?
Compared to his draft value, right?
Yeah, compared to his draft value. And sometimes we have to learn how to respect other people's opinions.
You say we, and it's just you.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm the only one getting disrespected right now. So, hey, the consensus, we need to learn how to respect other people's opinions. And when other people, I mean my opinions. Moving forward. Moving into America's team, your Week 2 Super Bowl champions of last year, your New Orleans Saints with the worst GM in the league, Mickey Loomis. But tonight, their GM is Nate Markham. And Nate Markham, I have to imagine, is at least going to nail this pick for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, if I'm Mickey Loomis, if I'm looking at what this team needs, obviously I don't have enough time in the day to figure out what all they need. Sorry, Rhett. But here's what I saw with the team last year is obviously towards the end of the season, one of the things they actually started doing better is getting to the quarterback. The pass rush win rate, everything started. There's a positive in all that garbage that was going on. That was a positive towards the end. So I want to build off that. I look at the quarterback position knowing that they probably do have a need there, especially with the whole Derek Carr talk. But as I said, if I'm in the role of GM, I don't like any of the quarterbacks there, especially at 9. That's going to change my team dynamic and the evolution for the future. But there is one player whose stock has taken a little bit of a hit, and that's because of the foot injury. But there's no doubting Will Johnson at quarterback for University of Michigan is an added piece that could be blue chip potential coming in at the the 9 pick of the draft. I mean, number 10. What you're trying to do there is complement what I said, what they did well at the end. They were creating pressures. Now, that may be a weakness as well this year as age starts to creep up on everybody. But if they can get, a little bit of playmaker, and at the quarterback position, Will Johnson is at the top of my list from an aspect of big, rangy, can make plays on the ball. If you look at what he's been able to do, he's essentially up and down. Obviously, 2022 freshman All-American, 2023 Big Ten conference player, led team with 4 interceptions. It was 24 though. It was the 2 interceptions, but he scored. He set the school record with 3 pick sixes. So you take a pass rush that's capable, hopefully, with a playmaker. You put him opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry, and I just think it sets up a really nice secondary. While they have so many pieces they need, when you have Kool-Aid, you have Will, you have Justin Reed they brought over, Tyrann Mathieu, Alontae Taylor, Jorge, you and I can probably not exact. I mean, the superlatives can be there, but rough some other times. Still, I know there's 1,000 different names we probably could have named, but I feel like that's just a really good landing spot for him. Will Johnson.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too, actually. That was one of those things where I've been telling friends, in fan group chats, nothing fantasy football related, but I'm like, if there's a pick that kind of just made sense for the Saints, it would kind of be going with Will Johnson, because cornerback is one of those needs in this roster, on a roster that has many needs. And instead of reaching on a quarterback this early or reaching on anything this early, why not take a guy who had some top 5 potential earlier in the process and go ahead and take someone who feels pretty safe at that point? So, yeah, I'm with you on that. And that moves me into the 10th overall pick. We mentioned a little bit earlier about the possibility of the Chicago Bears trading up tomorrow night for the aforementioned Ashton Jeanty contingent on whether guys like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are not on the board. But, guys, I'm going to shake it up a little bit, because if we know anything about the Chicago Bears and the running back position and new head coach Ben Johnson, there's one absolute consensus that we can all agree on. He looks at DeAndre Swift and he goes, I hate that guy.
Yep.
So what better way to get rid of the thing you hate the most than by drafting a replacement? And for me, that replacement is Omarion Hampton. If Ashton Jeanty is not on the board and they cannot move up, maybe they don't do it at 10, but if they can't move up, then you could possibly see the Chicago Bears trade down to a little bit later in the first round, pick up some extra draft capital, and still get a guy who in most years would be a slam dunk RB1 in a draft class.
Yeah, I mean, you look at I'm sorry, go ahead, Drew.
No, I just said I like it, and that's it. No more needed for me.
You like, yes, I too concur. I like it, but you look at the moves that Ben Johnson helped facilitate as soon as he became the head coach, working hand in hand with Ryan Pace. Offensive line. Like literally, they just built up that offensive line. They realized, hey, we just invested a number 1 overall pick in 2024 in good quarterback position, who got beat the hell last year. Let's not let that happen again. Okay. I hear that's important. He's taking the Detroit Lions model basically over to the Windy City with the Bears. And, no disrespect to DeAndre Swift, but kind of, no, he is not the future at the position. You look at the receiver position, Roma Dunze last year, they just signed DJ Moore last offseason to that contract extension. There is the floating around that maybe they bring Keenan Allen back, who's technically still a free agent, but whether or not that happens or not, they need some balance on this offense. You're protecting Caleb Williams. You have these offensive linemen that excel both in pass blocking and run blocking. It just makes too much sense to kind of just cap things off and bring some balance to the offense by drafting one of the best running backs in the draft class.
bringing balance to the force in Chicago. That's what we're here to do with Amari and Hampton. And we're moving into that 11th overall pick with the San Francisco 49ers. Aiden, they've been undergoing a massive rebuild this offseason. You kind of see them having a defensive piece that can go ahead and contribute to that rebuild.
So there have been a couple of curveballs thrown in this mock draft so far, which I love. It's very fun on draft eve, if you will. But the 49ers basically lost their whole defense this offseason for one reason or another. So outside of Nick Bosa, with or without losing the old defense, they had no pass rush to speak of last year. It was pretty deplorable and terrible, if I'm being honest. So I'm going to go with, to beef up that D-line or linebacking core, whichever one, Jalen Walker, linebacker / edge, Georgia. I like him more as a true, edge pass rusher. I think he has all the gifted tools and traits you want. But if you also want him to drop in coverage alongside Fred Warner, he can do that as well. He's a quote-unquote chess piece who can move around your defense, whether it's pressuring alongside Nick Bosa or dropping in coverage alongside Fred Warner. He can do it all and retooling and rebuilding your defense after, losing all these pieces. This is a nice rookie pick to make.
Jorge, what kind of IDP asset is Jalen Walker?
That is a great question. And it's kind of, and I hate to use this comparison, but it's kind of, he kind of has the knock that someone like Micah Parsons has. And Micah Parsons for IDP Fantasy Football, don't be wrong, is one of the top, players in all of fantasy football. But what keeps him from being like number one overall as far as a defensive lineman or number one overall as a linebacker is that those dual roles kind of eat into each other. And so you're not getting as high of the tackle volume, not getting as many pressures as you would if he was just dedicated to one spot. And so you look at Walker, that's kind of what you saw at Georgia. So the real question is, are they going to make him, pick one or the other? They just lost Drake Greenlaw in free agency. So therefore you could make the argument he should be off-ball linebacker. But, opposite Nick Bosa, who do you got? It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But for IDP purposes, it really is going to depend on where he ends up landing. I mean, if he wherever he lands, if they just keep him there, I think his IDP upside is definitely going to be there and somebody you should be targeting, like maybe the early second round of your IDP rookie drafts. But if they keep him as this jack of all trades player, I don't know, man. I kind of would, maybe go to the other edge rusher for the Georgia Bulldogs.
I agree. I think he has, in terms of team fit, I think his fit will be key because it's whether or not that coach finds a home for him. If he truly does use him as a, versatile chess piece, more like.
And ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard from Jorge Edwards is what you can find every Wednesday right before us on Shoot the Gap here on the Fantasy and Frames podcast channel. But right now, Drew, you have the Dallas Cowboys at 12. And quite frankly, I don't know if you're just a chaos agent. I don't know what we're going for right here, but I love it. So go ahead and let the people know where you see the Dallas Cowboys going tomorrow night at 12.
I think this offense needs another playmaker, and I think that the Ted McMillan hate has gone a little bit too far. I think that this is just like a prime example of prospect fatigue. We're tired of talking about a guy that's been extremely good for 2 years straight now. I mean, if you consider his freshman production, he's been really good for all 3 years he's been in college. But I think he's the only college receiver that's had 1,300-plus receiving yards the last 2 years. He's got great size. Obviously, it's what he's known for. He's an early declarer. He has a 19-year-old breakout age. He's got a career yards per route run of 2.34. He's got a career first downs per route run of 0.106. All are really strong marks. He's got a really strong profile, but for some reason people are freaked out because he didn't run a blazing fast 40. And I don't know who has watched Ted McMillan over the last 2 years and said, I bet that guy's going to break 40 records, but that is not his game. And I do not give a shit that he did not run a fast 40. Everything else still plays and will play at an NFL level. And I don't think that this is bad for CeeDee Lamb either. He might lose some targets, but he can afford to lose some targets with how many he's getting. The efficiency's still going to be there. Tech can line up outside, and that CD will still have the availability to be moved around, moved into the slot, lined up outside, and it's going to take at least a little bit of attention off CD as well. So I think this is a good thing for CeeDee Lamb. I think it's a good thing for the Cowboys offense. And I mean, clearly they have no intentions of running the ball considering their offensive line's terrible and they have the worst running back room in the league. So why not let them, if they're going to ask Dak to throw the ball 700 times, you might as well give him another good receiver to throw to.
Yeah, it's a valid take. But then we have out of rhythm. He is a Dallas Cowboys man. He says they need to take Ashton Jeanty. That's what they need. He says that the RB room, quote unquote, blows. We do need wide receivers, but we could take a wide receiver later in the draft.
You know what you can also take later in the draft? Running back. There's a lot more good running backs than there are wide receivers.
So, I mean, fair enough there. Jorge, we're going to go to the 13th overall pick, the Miami Dolphins. Go ahead and tell us where you're going in that situation.
So I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of his name, but I'm going cornerback, Jahdae Barron, Texas. He is literally as good as you can get at the cornerback position in the 2025 draft eligible cornerbacks. We've all heard the rumblings. I guess they're not even rumblings anymore. It's like a matter of fact. The Dolphins and Jalen Ramsey want to part ways. They're looking for trade partners. He's not going to be in their future going forward. And you have a cornerback here who's played out wide the majority of his career. Last year played primarily right cornerback, but can play any position on the defensive backfield at the cornerback position. You look at his 24 stats in the Power 5. He is PFF's #1 rated quarterback. In 2024, he only allowed an NFL quarterback passer rating of 38 when targeted. That is ridiculous. It gets even more ridiculous. He tied with Travis Hunter in interceptions with 4 in 2024. Against zone coverage, the #2 rated cornerback, allowing a quarterback rating when targeted of 54.4. Okay, zone coverage, everything is zone. But what if you need, you're going up against an alpha wide receiver? What is Barron going to do for you? Against man coverage last year, he allowed a quarterback rating when targeted of 9.6. That is unbelievable. Wow. Think about the perfect quarterback rating, 158.6. He allowed them a 9.6 quarterback rating. That is insane. And you talk about what you're losing in Jalen Ramsey and everything that he brings to the table. You're getting that back, and I think there's even the potential for more with Barron.
I love it. I love where you're going with that. I love that we are immediately drafting a Jalen Ramsey replacement. And I think for Miami, if they get a Jahdae Barron in that situation and they find a draft day partner for Jalen Ramsey, then all of a sudden you have extra draft capital to make that team even better. With a team that, according to PFF, needs some offensive line help, needs some help on the interior of the defensive line, and also needs that cornerback help. We've addressed the cornerback, so now they just have all these other areas, particularly the offensive line, that they can probably address a little bit later on, should they trade Jalen Ramsey. But speaking of offensive line help, Nate Markham, the Indianapolis Colts are on the clock with the 14th overall pick, and we are offensive line heavy in the early portion of this draft. Who do you have the Colts taking at this point?
Yeah, Chris Ballard, I think, has made it known that he likes athletic freaks, and while that could pose some on the offensive side, I think we've seen tight end mock to Indy incessantly. I think pass rush is an area of need still to go back-to-back years with taking an edge rusher if they went with Latu. But I think they need to address the offensive line. When you look at a team that they were, pretty banged up across the offensive line last year. And really the one piece that makes for me a lot of sense is Kelvin Banks, who not only can play tackle, he has the ability to play guard. They can move him around that offensive line. And I think that they know that they need to make sure that if you're going to give all the pieces to help Anthony Richardson succeed or Daniel Jones, that is tongue in cheek. It is not Daniel Jones. But really, if anything, it also just helps build that road grader mentality for Jonathan Taylor to have another, successful season. So while it's not sexy, and I'm sorry we're doing a lot of offensive line talk on this mock, we should have went all, make it all offense and fantasy relevant. There is a lot of relevancy with security across the offensive line. Kelvin Banks, Texas tackle, Indianapolis Colts.
Was there any hesitation on the fact that Tyler Warren had been mocked to them so much and he was still on the board? Were you tempted to do Tyler Warren instead?
100% so. In fact, actually, it was if it wasn't for the fact that there are 3 players that I had put in each time and changed, and it was Walter Nolan, it was Warren, and then Kelvin Banks just kept being there, and I'm thinking, man, looking at the games played for the Colts. I mean, there was only one offensive lineman that played more than like 13 games, and that was Quentin Johnson, or maybe
they lost Will Fries and Ryan Kelly in free agency this year as well, right?
Right. Matt Conkelves at guard is not, the entire answer. I mean, they have decent offensive line, but I feel like somebody that can move around is a smarter pick. Will they do that?
Especially
I don't know.
A team that's going to depend on the run as much as they are. Like it would be smart to invest in the offensive line.
Yeah, me personally, that's the direction I would go if I was Chris Ballard for a day.
And Nate, I think what we're missing right here is the fact that there was just a shocking under the radar confession from Drew Scott that he is out on Jelani Woods. Finally, can we confirm?
Absolutely, fucking not.
How long have you been in on Jelani Woods?
Since the day he was drafted.
Still going?
3 years
Still
ago.
Going. I saw a rehab video of him on a treadmill, and I pitched a tent. Oh my Lord, I was
by
so
December
excited.
he will be going.
Oh.
So Rhett, before we get to the next pick, Nate, you brought up something very interesting. We, in terms of doing a mock draft where we just talk about it from offensive players and a fantasy perspective. If you head over to fantasyandframes.com today, our newest writer Joe Goodwin just did just that. He did his mock draft where he's talking about things from a fantasy perspective, offense only, telling you which offensive rookies fit well with the teams the best. Check it out. It's a really awesome article over at fantasyandframes.com today.
Love that. And so we are moving to the Atlanta Falcons. And if I were a mean person, if I were a terrible person, if I weren't the upstanding man that I would, Shadir Sanders, if I were that person as a New Orleans Saints fan, I would definitely have them drafting Tyler Shuck right now because they have a track record of drafting quarterbacks randomly and just players at randomly at Kyle Pitts for the past few years now. But you know what? Lucky for the Atlanta Falcons, I'm not that person. I'm going to address a need for them, and I'm going to go with the guy who's probably the best off-ball linebacker in this draft, in Jihad Campbell from Alabama. I just think that is a guy that while there is some work to do, I do think he is a guy that does have a lot of upside and does have the chance to be a year-one contributor and eventually a really good starter. But in terms of what you're looking for in terms of IDP and fantasy at the linebacker position, you're looking for guys who are going to get tackles, and I think Jihad Campbell is certainly one of those guys that fits that mold for sure. So I'm not a miserable person. I have Jihad Campbell to the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm sticking to it.
He's got some rush ability as well, which I feel like they've needed a pass rusher for the last decade plus, and they just never care about it. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of Mike Green being mocked to Atlanta, but I didn't go that particular direction. But
I like that too. But I mean, I know taking a linebacker in the early to mid first round isn't popular because of positional value and shit like that. But Campbell's a stud, man. I think he's going to be a freak at the next level. So I like the pick.
They just need the best defensive piece, literally anybody.
Yeah, just give them somebody on defense.
I will say, JT and I over on Shoot the Gap when we were covering rookie prospect linebackers, one of the things we brought up is coincidentally interior defensive linemen specifically very deep in this draft class. Linebacker, not so much. Yeah. So if you really want these elite linebackers, you better pounce on them quickly. And I mean that from both a fantasy IDP perspective as well as a football perspective. You look at the Atlanta Falcons, Nate Landman goes in free agency to the Los Angeles Rams. You have Caden Ellis there, who's been kind of holding things down for the Falcons. Troy Anderson, man, I really wish Troy Anderson could be a consistent IDP option for fantasy purposes, but the guy just gets injured way too much, and so this makes sense. This is definitely a huge upgrade in the linebacking core here, Rhett. And like Aiden, you were just saying, they just need an elite piece, and this is definitely one of them.
Great looks all around from everybody. So we're going to move to Aiden with the 16th overall pick and the Arizona Cardinals. PFF has their needs as guard, defensive lineman, and cornerback. Aiden, you did none of those things, and you decided to introduce chaos into this draft. So where you going, buddy?
I feel like people need to be more and more aware of them going with a legit offensive weapon here. So 16 overall, give the Arizona Cardinals Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas. I personally love Golden. This might shock you, but he's, me personally, my wide receiver 2 in this class, right behind Tat. Yeah, I know. I don't know why everyone's down him all of a sudden. He backed up the speed on film at the 40 time. They have Trey McBride, who's really the wide receiver 1, but still technically formally a tight end. They have MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., hopefully a big bounce back from the fantasy community. And then that's it. I don't care about Zay Jones. I don't care about Michael Wilson. Like, Greg Dortch is a fun little player, but that's it. He's really just a wide receiver 3/4 in an offense. So I think they need a legit weapon, and people aren't thinking about that. And for defensive line, they built up their defensive line pretty darn well in free agency. So that's not a concern as much as it was maybe a month or so ago. So I'm going to go with Matthew Golden, best offensive weapon outside of tight end when they have Trey McBride already on the board, in my opinion. My wide receiver 2 in this class.
And what I find interesting about this is Aiden, all in the chat last week of last week's episode of Fourth and Friends, so we sung the high praises of Marvin Harrison Jr. It tells you exactly what he thinks of my opinions around here, that he mocked Matthew Golden tonight. So
I don't even remember what you're referring to, but yeah.
My take about Marvin Harrison Jr. being a very interesting player for the 2020.
No, I said I'm big on it. I said in my whole spiel there that he's going to have a bounce back, in my opinion.
Oh, well, good. So you already know after all. Yeah. I'm just out here attacking people tonight. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, Brees Hall, everyone else.
Yeah. My show, my rules. Get over it, buddy.
The violence.
All right. So moving into the 17th overall pick, I think Drew Scott is on the clock as the GM of the Cincinnati Bengals. I think everyone is very concerned that this defense will not be very good this year. And Drew, you're here to address that. Who is the savior that is going to take the Cincinnati Bengals defense from 32nd to 31st here in 2025?
And the defense was already bad last year. Now, apparently, one of their best players, their best defensive player, wants out. And so we're going to get them some more edge help, and we're going to give them Mike Green, edge out of Marshall, in my opinion, the best available edge and possibly even defensive player, period, on the board at this point to try to help them get some pass rush. Look, for fantasy purposes, I personally love that the Bengals defense is so terrible because if they're giving up a lot of points, that means that Burrow and Chase and Higgins, they need to score a lot of points, and that is great for me. But I got a feeling the Bengals probably don't love it, so they really, really need some defensive help. So just like kind of the same thing, same thought process with the Falcons. Just give them the best defensive player on the board.
Yeah. Hard to argue with it. And it's hard to argue with Jorge's next pick for the Seattle Seahawks at 18th overall. A team that did a lot of things this offseason. They're obviously changing it up under the new head coach. But they need some offensive line help, and Jorge is ready to give that to them. Go ahead, Jorge.
Yeah, so I have them taking out of North Dakota State, Gray Zabel, offensive tackle. Look, it goes without saying that the offensive line is a huge concern. Obviously, there's a reason why I believe Geno Smith didn't have that great of a year last year. It's because he was on his back for most of it. They bring in Sam Darnold. Okay, it seems like to a certain degree it's kind of like a translational move or a horizontal move if you're believing the Sam Darnold can replicate what he did last year in Minnesota. I personally think that was a scheme-dependent match made in heaven. But that notwithstanding, we talk about the other weapons. We talk about the fact that you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have the running game with Kenneth Walker, and you got I think on the Dynasty 365 show you guys were talking about last week about Kenneth Walker. Aiden, I know you're really high on Kenneth Walker.
Yeah,
and we're talking a lot. Prior to the NFL draft to go out and make trades for him. What I really like about Zabel, though, is he really complements Charles Cross here on the offensive line, who grades out to be, for the Seattle Seahawks, really good at pass blocking, really good at run blocking, very versatile in what he's able to do. And that's right up Zabel's alley. We talk about, where the experts are projecting him to go. You have Lance Zierlein projecting him to be a day 1, day 2 pick. He plays very well versus run, using run blocking or zone blocking. I mean, the guy is a monster. He's 6'6", 305, and 2023 rather. He allowed only 2 sacks on the season. Last season, only 1 sack allowed. I mean, they have so many issues along that offensive line. But you gotta start with the bookends here and try and take care of your quarterback, and hopefully that's enough to get some magic out of Sam Darnold again this year. But if not, then you're setting up the stage for whoever that quarterback's going to be, in a few years.
I love the idea that we are setting up the Seattle Seahawks for success with this new coaching regime, with this new quarterback, just new offensive coordinator, and a new quarterback and all these different things. But Nate, the Tampa Bay Bucks are on the board. They were a playoff team last year. Baker Mayfield seems to have the magic, but they have other needs. They are all on the defensive end. So what are you doing to help the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with their defense?
What's funny is I feel like as a little bit at fantasy as well as like real draft going into this pick, because Tampa Bay's on the clock. I have 3 positions, 3 players that I'm thinking would make sense for that team. One, maybe they address wide receiver with, obviously, as Mike Evans getting longer in the tooth, and they make that move. 2, at linebacker, again, the same thing. Levante David, someone to replace him. Both players that I could have seen slotted in for that were taken before. So not on tilt, because there was no time limit for me, but opportunistic. Walter Nolan, defensive lineman out of Ole Miss, is the smoke is wafting. There's a chance that he sneaks into the top 10, 12 picks. There's a chance he falls out of the first round. Character issues aside, the guy was as productive as anybody. He was an Outland finalist. If you watch his game against Georgia, who seemingly everybody on their offensive line is going to get drafted, he was dominant. Athleticism won't wow you on tape, but read, react, he does a lot of everything. And when I started digging in a little bit more, I heard a lot of the buildup. While they don't necessarily need an interior defensive lineman specifically, he has the ability to move to the outside, move inside. And I just feel like it's a luxury pick for a team that, while they may have some weaknesses, they don't have a ton of weaknesses. Offensively speaking, they're fine right now. Defensively speaking, they have pass rushers. They have, they got Hassan Reddick. That's going to help with that. And in the secondary, they should be good. I think this is strictly a nice luxury pick. And you go with that, hey, can we mold this potential character issue player into being what we see and for that defensive line?
So, Nate, you're not big on Kalijah Cansey then on the interior?
Oh, I am. I think that the key to an ideal defensive line is rotation. Okay. I think that, especially when you have Cansey, Vita Vea, Logan Hall didn't impress me necessarily, but you also throw in, like Greg Gaines comes over, and all of those guys have production. It's a matter for me. I think that, you don't have to rely on running 85% of the snaps with each one of those guys. And again, the rotation for me is what really makes, especially with aging linebackers, it's nice to have some fresh legs up front.
And Todd Bowles loves D linemen, so.
Exactly. And I think he's the type of coach that can actually take a character issue player, if that's one of their concerns, and get the most out of them.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good one.
And so Walter Nolan, Tampa Bay Bucks, 19th overall, moving to the Denver Broncos, 20th overall. All the mocks have seemed to be locked in on Amari and Hampton going right here. He went 10 picks ago. So there was thoughts for me of going Travion Henderson, but then Nate just brought up the tremendous point of having rotation on the defensive line. And I just love the idea of having a high upside defensive tackle like Derek Harmon go to the Denver Broncos. And here's why. This offseason, they re-signed DJ Jones to a 3-year, $39 million contract, which for a guy who had a 54.0 run defense grade last year on PFF and a guy who was 320 pounds, you would think he needs to be a little better on that. Not to mention he only played 41% of snaps last year for the Denver Broncos. In that 3-4 scheme, you're going to need that rotation. Yeah, you have Malcolm Roach there, who is a solid piece, but You can also add someone who could potentially, if he gets it together, he ran a sub 540 at 315 pounds at the NFL Combine. So you have a guy who is athletic. You have a guy who is strong. You have a guy who does a lot of things well. Maybe just needs a little bit of refinement. But if he is a rotation piece in year one that they can build on going forward, I think that is a very good possibility with some good potential for the Broncos.
Yeah, Derek Harmon was another name that I was looking at. I feel like Nolan fits for Tampa a little more inside out. But Derek Harmon, if you look at some of the grading scales for defensive linemen over the past 10 years, both Nolan and Harmon are sneakily in that mix of guys that here in this picks 19 and 20 that could pay immediate dividends. Real football, probably not fantasy perspective. I don't see any of them really accruing enough splash plays, Jorge, to really be fantasy relevant per se.
Agreed. But from a real football perspective, you look at, the success they had at defensive end with, Jonathan Cooper, being good. He's not like one of those players, but he's really good. You saw the emergence of Nick Benito last year once they traded Baron Browning to the Cardinals, who coincidentally got a contract extension for Arizona. But Nick Benito just has been playing lights out since he's been given that starting role. And you mentioned now, Rhett, the signing of the defensive interior. They're just solidifying up front, and it just makes too much sense to, I think the offense is good to a certain degree as far as there's not major pieces that need to be overhauled outside the wide receiver position. I think, but that's a story for a different time. But one thing, you look at the back end of the defense for the Broncos. You have Brandon Jones, you got Talanoa Hufanga, who came over in free agency. You have Alex Singleton, and you have Dre Greenlaw, assuming that they're both healthy coming off of their respective injuries. You have a solid linebacking core there, and now you're solidifying the defensive line. This Broncos team could be really scary in 2025.
They made the playoffs last year with all those holes in their game as well. So a very interesting team in the Denver Broncos, who still, despite making those playoffs last year, do have quite a bit of holes that they need to address. But that's why we're here at the NFL Draft, and that's why we are at the 21st pick with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aiden, you just seem to be on a roll tonight. You just seem to want to talk ball about guys who could potentially be fantasy relevant or just be talked about in general. Basically, you're looking to get us some buzz. So go ahead and set the streets on fire with this next pick.
So if Shedeur Sanders, QB out of Colorado, falls this far at 21st pick, I think this has to be the pick for Mike Tomlin and his staff over there in Pittsburgh. The reports are right now that he falls this far. Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion, while he's my QB2 behind Cam Ward, I think he's a better pure pocket passer than Cam Ward, if that makes sense. And I think that's exactly the prototype Steelers.
Sorry.
What?
That's booing. That's just what I expect the crowd to do. For Shedeur. That was fucking rude of me. I'm so sorry.
I didn't even notice.
An asshole.
I know. Yeah, fucking.
I was confused why you were laughing all of a sudden. Okay, anyway. Shedeur Sanders, I think they can't roll. They traded for DK Metcalf. They have George Pickens. They're not going all in to settle for Mason Rudolph or Skylar Thompson at quarterback. So I think if Shedeur's there, this is a sprint to the podium moment, and I think he's in terms of pure pocket passing, he's the best of the class, in my opinion. So maybe I'm a bit higher now on DK Metcalf, and I'll have to move him up in the ranks. And then I don't know if George Pickens gets traded away or not, but just isolating the QB variable, I think this has to be Shedeur Sanders if he's here, like reports are indicating.
Yeah.
I think the Sanders hate has gone a little bit too far. Not to say that you need to think he's a top 5 pick, anything like that, but I think just because of who he is, who his father is, how confident they are in themselves and their abilities, I think people just don't like confidence for whatever reason it may be. Some people say it's arrogance. I just think it's confidence. But he is the most accurate quarterback in this class. He has a career completion percentage north of 70%. He's the only draft eligible quarterback that can say that. He has the experience that you want. He's got over 1,600 pass attempts. He's got prototypical size. His career interception rate is 1.32, well below the 2.5 rate that you typically look at. He doesn't have arm strength that's going to blow you away, but he can make the throws that NFL quarterbacks need to make. He's not going to give you anything from a run game, so we're not going to love him from a fantasy standpoint. Like, he's going to be more of a guy that you hopefully can stream in the right matchup, things like that. Like, from a fantasy standpoint, he's not going to be super exciting because he doesn't jump off the tape as one of those guys that's going to have like a 45 passing touchdown, 5,000 yard passing season or anything like that. But I think he's going to be a really solid NFL quarterback. Like, I think he's like a Tua type of quarterback. And so I think that I think he's going to be a better real life NFL quarterback than he will be a fantasy asset. But I think the sugar hate has gone far too far.
You will have loved my bold take for the Steelers taking a quarterback at 21 on Dynasty 65. Spoiler alert. I have Shador falling to the end of the first round and Kyle McCord jumping up into the first round. Pittsburgh Steelers. Bold take. Still.
I mean, it's called bold for a reason, so I can't fault you.
Exactly.
So we're going to go ahead and move to the Los Angeles Chargers at the 22nd overall pick. There's a certain prospect who's been mocked to the top 10 pretty much throughout this process. And, well, for some reason or another, he just kind of took a slide, which we've seen happen in the NFL draft before. But several teams' loss would be the Los Angeles Chargers' gain. So, Drew, talk us through that pick.
You talk about sprinting to the podium. They would hand this ticket to Usain Bolt and be like, get this shit up here as fast as possible. Tyler Warren to the Los Angeles Chargers. The guy is – look, to be honest, I think that him and Colston Loveland are pretty close. Like, I don't think the gap is as large as some have made it out to be. But while I don't know if he's like a top 5, top 7 pick in the draft, I also don't think he should fall this far. But I get it. Team needs, things like that. Things happen. People fall that we think shouldn't fall all the time. And in this mock, it happened to be Tyler Warren. But in this instance, this is where the slide stops, and Justin Herbert gets himself another weapon to go along with Vlad.
So considering where he was currently being mocked, which is anywhere from, let's say, the middle of that top 10 down to probably about pick 15, 16. Usually the slide ends around Indianapolis. How thrilled would Tyler Warren be in that situation, Drew, to have Justin Herbert as his quarterback versus, I don't know, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones in Indianapolis, or Justin Fields in New York, or any other variety of guys you could look at? Because for the most part, in that 7 to 15 range, you don't have a whole bunch of elite quarterbacks in that range.
No, he would definitely prefer the quarterback play that will be coming from the Chargers. And there's definitely a benefit for sliding to the back of the first round, because the back of the first round is typically where most of the elite quarterbacks are, because usually their teams are not bad enough to be picking early. So there is value to that. Now, he might not be thrilled in the difference in the paycheck from being like the 7th overall pick versus the 22nd overall pick. It's a little bit of a pay cut there, but he can make up that pay cut by being extremely productive with an elite quarterback, and that second contract will look real lovely. So I'm sure he'll get over that in no time.
And so, Tyler Warren to the Chargers, I think, would be a fantastic fit and super interesting. Jorge, we are at the Green Bay Packers in the 23rd pick, and for a room that already has enough questions in the wide receiver position, you woke up and you chose violence for Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers in terms of options, but it makes sense at the same time.
Yeah. So, while there are a lot of questions in that Packers wide receiving core, I don't think there's any question in the talent in Emeka Egbuka coming out of the Ohio State Buckeyes. The first question everybody should be asking is, but Jaden Reed's the slot wide receiver. Egbuka played slot wide receiver in college. Like, why are you having 2 slot wide receivers on team? How good is Jaden Reed? Like, let's think about this. How good is he actually of a wide receiver, and how do they really utilize him in this Packers offense. Last year, he had 1, 2, 3 games over 100 yards. You know, he was used as a gadget player in the rushing game. You know, they didn't really keep him as a true elite slot wide receiver. You look at Ibuka, like that's his bread and butter. That's where he stays. He's super efficient. He can do everything at that position. His contested catch percentage and contested catch rate rather, is elite. You know, this guy is without a doubt one of the best wide receivers in this class. And I think this is definitely going to shake things up. You know, whether they move Jaden Reed outside maybe and try to see what he does there. But last year was very, very worrisome for me because it's not just the fact that they didn't, you know, hammer home and, you know, funnel all the targets to Jaden Reed. It's the fact that they were like, well, we'll throw you in as a running back now. And it's just like, what are you doing? Like, I catch the damn ball. Utilize me the way they should. And the fact that they did not do that makes me think they don't maybe have as much confidence as we in the fantasy community have in Jaden Reed.
Yeah, it's really interesting because last year he only played 70 snaps out wide versus 343 in the slot. But in 2022, he did play 122 snaps out wide compared to 276 in the slot. Now the snap numbers are smaller, but he had 2.78 yards per route run whenever he lined up outside. And I don't say that to say that he's going to be a full-time outside receiver in the NFL. I just think that if this pick does come to fruition, that the Packers would be able to get creative with how they move Jaden Reed around, how they move Ibuka around. Like, you don't have to say, all right, you are now a slot receiver. That's the only place you get to line up, and that's the end of story. Like, if they make a pick like this, surely to God they understand the type of player that Ibuka is and you know, the creativity that they're going to have to do. But the reality, Jaden Reed, I think he is a good wide receiver too in the NFL. And then I think they have a bunch of decent wide receiver threes beyond that. And with Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, like their wide receiver room is decent, but there's no clear top receiver. Ibuka would immediately be that the moment that he was drafted. I mean, he is almost as green as you can get across the board. 2.64 career yards per route run, 0.127 career first downs per route run. Over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns by his second year in college, despite playing in one of the most stacked receiver rooms that we have seen in college. A 19.9 breakout age. He's got good size. The only thing he doesn't have going for him is that he isn't an early declare. But whenever you produce that early in college, I start to care less about you if you're an early declare or not. The production's there. So who cares that you played all 4 years in college at that point, given the production that you had and the receiver rooms that you were in? I think that he's the safest receiver in this class. Like, if I had to say which receiver 100% will not bust, he would be my pick.
I'd agree.
Yeah, it's a great take. And we're going to go ahead and go back to our man Out of Rhythm tonight. And he's saying, as of right now, no Jackson Dart love in the first round. And he puts a little LOL behind it.
Overhyped.
So I'll just throw this out there. I could see a team trading back up into the back of the first round. We did not do trades in this mock, but I could see a world where a team trades back up into the back of the first round to grab Jackson Dart. If we were doing trades, I think that might be something that we played out. But as the way the board lies, I don't think he should be getting drafted in the early first round. And then the teams that are picking in the back of the first round, most of them are picking back there because they have really good teams with really good quarterbacks, and they don't need one.
Full take for tomorrow night.
Pertaining to Jackson Dart being a draft backup into the first round candidate, I'm gonna say this: Mickey Loomis and his stupid evil goatee is just the type of brother to do that type of move tomorrow night. So just
Jorge, does that play into your bold take?
No, my bold take is that Shedeur Sanders falls to the end of the first round, and either the Giants or the Browns trade into the first round, maybe with Washington, and you get Hunter and Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland.
Ooh,
reunited.
That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be shocked to see even if Pittsburgh really does want him and they feel comfortable enough with nobody else chopping at the bit, they may even trade down, try to pick up some extra draft capital. Because I think Pittsburgh doesn't have a second round pick.
No, they gave it for Metcalf.
Yeah, so I think they maybe try to secure another top 100 pick. That's the dilemma, though, is where is everybody else drafts board on Sanders.
Not to mention, I think the Steelers have learned, like, just because we need a quarterback and we're at a good spot in the draft, we don't want to pull a Kenny Pickett again and draft a quarterback for the sake of drafting a quarterback and sending our franchise back a few years.
How dare you? How dare you with the Kenny Pickett disrespect?
Exactly.
He's my Brees Hall. What can I say?
Yeah, he's no Brees Hall. But Nate, the Minnesota Vikings are on the board for the 24th overall pick. I like where you're going right here, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good mix for Brian Flores' defense. I look at the offensive side of things and think they don't need to make any moves there. They solidified the pieces interior offensive line. Look at defense. I could make a case for an interior defensive lineman, but I'm looking at an aging Harrison Smith. I'm looking at a defense that likes to run three safeties pretty heavy in rotation. And I'm seeing a safety out of Georgia who just last year led that team in tackles for 3 straight years, has been productive. And honestly, Malachi Starks seems like just a great fit for that defense to slot in. And even maybe if it's not play this year immediately in significant snaps, but at some point with, like I said, Harrison Smith with not many years left, I think he's a great replacement for that, as well as the rotational pieces for Brian Flores.
Don't forget the last
he's going to make his way onto the field. He's such a good player.
What'd you say, Jorge, about Byron Murphy?
I was saying, well, they also lost Cameron Bynum in free agency.
Oh, yeah, Cameron Bynum. Exactly.
They're free. So that could also be, like you said, adding to that rotation and taking more of the snaps that Bynum was taking as well.
So Malachi Starks going 24th overall to the Minnesota Vikings. Here in the 25th overall pick, the Houston Texans are on the clock. We know they probably need another wide receiver somewhere in there. Luther Burden is on the board. Might have been an oversight on my part, but you also have a guy in Josh Connerly from Oregon here in the 25th overall pick that really showed himself to have some real serious upside in how he performed against Abdul Carter when they played last season in conference play. You have a guy who is 6'5", 311 pounds. If we're going to talk about arm size, he's 33.5 inches, but hey, he could be growing just like Will Campbell is. Bottom line, he is a guy that has good feet. He's able to slide. Maybe has a little bit of a problem when it comes to setting a little bit too much. But that being said, you have a guy who has all the raw tools there. And if you want to talk about a guy who last year we talked about being an athletic tackle who is seen as a little bit raw, but ended up having a fantastic first year for the Cincinnati Bengals, we had the same type of conversation around Amarius Mims last season, and he ended up being pretty darn good right out of the gate for Cincinnati.
I know you mentioned possible oversight with Luther Burden being on the board. And while I do I think that Luther Burden should also be a first round pick. I think your head's in the right place. Like, their offensive line was terrible last year, and then they just traded away their best offensive lineman off an offensive line that was already bad.
Makes sense.
If CJ Stroud has any chance to have a bounce back year, they have to improve that offensive line. So I think your head's in the right place. I don't know enough about the offensive line to know if Connerly's the right pick over Simmons or, the other guys are on the board. I have no idea, but I think that your head's in the right place.
Yeah, the recency bias, if you will, that the last game that Houston has on their, from last year against the Chiefs, that was the reason they lost. Is it was constant pressure getting to Stroud, and I like Connerly there when I've seen him mock to Kansas City when they've taken as a tackle. So he looks. There's flaws to his game from what I've seen, but dude, I don't know anything about that either. I just read what other people say, and then I regurgitate it and try to add a little bit of 46 years of knowledge to think what I think. And I mean, we all think, we can gain something, but I think your head is right position-wise, 100% like Drew said.
Appreciate that, fellas. We're going to move to the Los Angeles Rams at 26. Aiden is on the clock. And Drew, I think you're going to like where Aiden is taking you boys right now.
Give the people what they want, Aiden.
Albert say,
are waiting.
Do you got the Rams taking Colston Loveland, Aiden? Tell us.
Yes, I do. This is an
Yes, he
absolute
does.
dream pick. The Rams barely have any needs at all. They just need a passing game weapon for the future to go with Puka because Devontae Adams is getting up there in age. I know, pretty decently sized 2-year deal. We all know last year it wasn't hidden that the Rams tried to trade up for Brock Bowers. It failed, but kind of going back to the same philosophy here. Loveland is the Brock Bowers, but same philosophical approach here, in my opinion. Sprint to the podium moment for Colston and Loveland. Maybe they do run 12% more, certain tight end sets because we know they don't really involve their tight ends all that much, but I think that could be shifting. It feels like Tyler Higbee's been in the league for 100 years now, and I think Loveland's sorely needed. Imagine they tried out Matthew Stafford with Colston Loveland, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua. Fantasy-wise, I'm telling you right now, in this scenario where they get Loveland, I will be ranking Matthew Stafford as a back-end QB1 over the summer for redraft. I'm just putting it out there. If they do get Loveland, I would be extremely bullish on Stafford. So I think this is a perfect fit.
I love it. No, you just made Drew so happy tonight. You just made Drew's night. And
that's what I try to do.
Drew, with the 27th overall pick, you're going to be able to make my night if you can nail the pronunciation of this name. For this next pick right here.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit the pronunciation, but Donovan Zaraku.
You got it.
Did I get it? All right.
Yeah.
The Baltimore Ravens, they just sit back and they do what they do. They collect talent. They let the draft board come to them, and they take what I believe is the best player available at this point in the draft. In the little bit of homework I've done on the edge class, I really like Donovan Ezraku. And at this point, I think that similar to what you said about the Rams, Aiden, I don't think that the Ravens have a lot of needs or holes necessarily, but you can never have enough depth, kind of what Nate was talking about with the Bucs. You can never have enough depth on either side of the line, offensive or defensive line. And so we plug in Ezraku, and he feels like a future Pro Bowler in that Ravens defense. So give them some more defensive help.
BPA like they always do.
So Donovan Ezraku goes to the Baltimore Ravens at the 27th overall pick. Jorge, at the 28th overall pick, the Detroit Lions are on the clock. And if we know anything about Dan Campbell kind of just likes to assemble the Avengers. That's kind of what he's done over these past few years. So maybe he gets another Infinity Stone, or it could be just another Pebble. But who are they going with at the 28th overall pick, in your opinion?
So it was difficult for me to, look over edge rusher, given the fact that Aiden Hutchinson, regardless of the fact that he was super elite prior to the injury, like a bone was sticking out of his leg last year, and I get modern medicine comes a long way, and, athletic trainers and rehab and all that stuff is super advanced now. But like, do you know that he's going to be the same Aiden Hutchinson, like after such a gruesome injury? I don't know. And that, and so maybe having some help on the other side, they let go of Zadarius Smith, so it might, getting an elite edge rusher at this point in the draft, pairing him up with Aiden Hutchinson could be a way to go. But if you've heard the rumors lately that Jameson Williams could be traded during the NFL draft, if you're one of those people who's like, I don't think Tim Patrick is the guy at left wide receiver, then you go and you get the best damn wide receiver who's left in the NFL draft to this point, and that's Luther Burden. Again, similar situation like I was talking about with Igbuka. You have Amon-Ra, who's the slot wide receiver. Well, Burden can play anywhere. We look at, last year, his NFL quarterback rating when targeted. He actually excelled better when he was playing outside left and outside right for PFF in the grading scale. So, yes, I understand he is a very elite slot wide receiver, but this guy could move around and play any position on the field and find success. And again, let's say they keep Jameson Williams and obviously they have Amon-Ra. It's definitely a major upgrade over Tim Patrick. So, I mean, take the talent at this one. Take the best player available, which I believe that on offense is Luther Burden.
Sneaky sneaky pick that no one's really kind of thought of. So I like that you went receiver if they do trade away Jameson, or they just need like a true wide receiver 3 upgrade over Tim Patrick.
And yeah,
And
this
if you have any questions on Luther Burden, go back and watch his film from 2 years ago. Like his usage last year was criminal, but Luther Burden is a stud. He's legit. And if you have any doubts, go watch his sophomore film. And it is poetry in motion. It's a beautiful thing. I'm fully in on Luther Burden.
Me too. Yeah, people forget that. But
when he was the top recruit in the country, and when Mizzou landed him, obviously being on their doorstep, I couldn't believe that they were going to get him. And then Brady Cook played, like you said, that sophomore season was so good. They played so bad last year that I think that it's going to really pay dividends for a team like Detroit. Or if I really, selfishly speaking, I know the Chiefs have more needs than a wide receiver, but that matchup would be so nice. And I wish it would happen. I don't think it will, but man, him on Detroit is disgustingly wealth of riches. I love it.
I agree.
So then we're moving into that 29th pick. Nate, you are the GM of Jorge's Washington Commanders. And where you have them going is kind of one of these polarizing players. Some people love the upside. Some people question where the production came from and why he's going this high. But I want you to explain why the Washington Commanders could possibly go in the direction you have them going in the 29th overall pick.
Yeah, I think, again, it's kind of another luxury pick when you have a team that out of nothing, Jorge, I think you'll agree, if this defense was not one that I had anticipated with all the losses they had across the defensive line being as dynamic and as successful as they were. Granted, yes, they were rough against the run. They're excellent against the pass. So you would think maybe a big body would be helpful. And they kind of did that. Javon Kinlaw, you go out and get Dietrich Wise, but Micah Williams is such a luxury pick that might be, immediate impact, maybe not. But I think that long-term size, speed, explosiveness, and here's a fun stat, is that 30% of his career production of his career tackles have been tackles for loss. Now, regardless of what, like Rhett said, where did the production come from and everything else, it still was, as a freshman, 28 tackles, 4.5 sacks. As a sophomore, 18 tackles, 6.5 TFLs. And then as a junior, 2 forced fumbles. So splash plays were there, but 21 tackles and 6 starts, 8.5 of those were TFLs and 5 sacks. So when on the field, extremely explosive. I think that's what you kind of got. I think that's what you go for in a draft, especially at pick 29. I'm going for true upside, especially as when I don't see any standout need. And Jorge, maybe you'll disagree. Maybe cornerback is more of a need than edge. And I can understand that. But I don't love any of the corners more than I like Michael Williams over any of the other edge rushers.
So, So a few thoughts on this. I think Washington really squeezed every single ounce of juice out of that orange of the defense last year that they could. Mm-hmm. And eventually, the juice ran out and they got eviscerated in the NFC Championship game by the Philadelphia Eagles. That notwithstanding, they lose. Why am I forgetting his name now? It doesn't matter because he's a Dallas Cowboy and I hate him just by default.
Yeah.
You have a situation in the linebacker.
Dante Fowler.
Thank you, Dante Fowler. You lose Dante Fowler, but they signed Dorrance Armstrong, who's they signed him from
the Cowboys.
Swap
them. You have Frankie Louvu, who one of the things that could be a knock, is the fact that, again, using Micah Parsons as an example, sometimes asked to play off ball, sometimes asked to play edge rusher. And I think teams do that more often than not when they're deficient at having a pure pass rusher. And so having, Michael Williams step into there, maybe you start to see an improvement in the linebacking core. Yeah, I agree that the cornerback position is something that needs to be addressed, but the fact that they're able to, if they do in fact take Michael Williams and don't trade out of it, I think you're starting to solidify this defense up front, as well as getting some help and assisting the linebacking core indirectly.
Love it for the Washington Commanders at 29. And now Aiden's Buffalo Bills are on the clock at the 30th overall pick. And boys, I was sitting there going through these picks all afternoon, but you know what the NFL draft is about sometimes? Sometimes the NFL draft is about surprises. So we went in one direction, and then I looked at the draft board, and we go, wait, that guy's still on the board? So with the 30th overall pick and the Buffalo Bills needing help with the edge, get the Buffalo Bills Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. So you're talking about a guy who is 6'5", 200, close to 270 pounds, ran a 4.59 at the NFL draft with a 40-inch vertical jump, had the 10-yard split in 1.58 seconds. Just a freak athlete, but kind of in that same mold as Michael Williams, where the lack of production at times, a little bit puzzling for a guy like Shamar Stewart who tested out so well. But he's got great bursts. He's got the great strength to drive those blockers. He has that potential to be a difference maker. And for a Buffalo team who is still looking for that next step to get over the hump and get to the Super Bowl, I think having as much edge help as possible to go along with Gregory Rousseau, having a guy like Shamar Stewart who can develop into being an elite pass rusher because of his physical profile, I think is a can't-miss spot at 30. With a team that has so few holes, you got to shoot for upside at this point.
Yeah,
he's a very interesting case study of he's got all the physical traits, but if he's such a good pass rusher, why doesn't he rush the passer good? just kind of very simply put, like
why does he rush the
everything? He's got all the physical tools, everything like that, but the tackles for loss, the sacks, things like that, actually finishing the play just hasn't been there. But he's got all the attributes and the tools you want, and I think a team like Buffalo could be a good landing spot for him because I do think that they could mold him into a successful NFL player. I think landing spot will be really important for Stewart.
You have to also think when you have these teams drafting edge rushers who have so much upside, what really helps them is who's playing opposite of them. If you're a defensive end and you're like by default the best defensive end on the defensive line, well, offensive linemen are going to just double team you, and then they're not worried about on the other side. But if you get more one-on-one opportunities, that definitely increases your productivity, or at least your potential for productivity. You are completely right. There are instances where you could have all the efficiency metrics all you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't produce, you don't produce. But I still think this is a really good pick because I do still have faith in the pick.
Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock with the 31st pick. We're closing out this first round, one pick after this. Aiden, you're on the clock for the Chiefs. Make Nate Markham proud.
Yeah, so I could have gave them the worst pick possible here, but I decided against that. But in my opinion, they need to go trenches, whether it's O-line, D-line. I think the value is too good to pass up here. They need to take the best O-lineman available. And to me, that is Josh Simmons, offensive tackle from Ohio State. Right now on our lads, they have Kingsley Sumatia, however you say it, moving over to left guard. Thank you. And then I know they signed Jalen Moore to like 2 years, $30 million, 15 per. Significant investment there, but is that really who you want to hitch your wagon to? And then Wanya Morris isn't it either. So I'm going to go with Josh Simmons here. I could see them going a different O-lineman like Donovan Jackson, but I do prefer Simmons by just a bit. So I'm going to go Josh Simmons here. I don't really care about the money they gave Jalen Moore, but I'm going Josh Simmons.
Yeah, Jalen Moore is...
He's fine.
He's fine. Like, that's the thing is like when he filled in last year for the 49ers, there were some games where he looked okay, but the rest of the offensive line was so beat up and banged up that he was asked to take on more than I thought was fair to judge him by. But at the same time, who cares? He's going to be asked to protect Patrick Mahomes' blind side. And sure, Moving Suamatea really is going to play guard probably more than anything else, and having that's what I would guess.
What if they move Simmons as a left tackle? Jalen Moore's played guard in the past, so what if they just move Jalen Moore inside to guard?
That would be, well, that's what I think that they probably will do. I would like to see, Kingsley, we'll just keep it simpler and do that, get more opportunity because of the draft capital. I'd like to see him get a couple more snaps, but I do agree. I think offensive line is by far the most need for this team, even though, believe it or not, they actually do have some holes and areas of concern.
Yeah.
And so we are here with Drew Scott with your Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles at the 32nd overall pick in the first round. Drew, what do you give the team that pretty much has everything to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles, they really don't focus like just on the now. They're one of those teams that are looking ahead, looking to fill holes in the future. And I know right now they have Jordan Davis at nose tackle, but with the amount of talent they have on that team, I have to imagine the players that are on the hierarchy of guys that they want to extend, Jordan Davis is probably going to be one of those guys on the way out. And so I think given the talent on the board and given the fact that there aren't really any Georgia players that they can draft right now, they have to go another direction. And I think Kenneth Grant should have went probably about 10 picks ago, but he is a nose tackle and I get position of need and everything like that. But at this point in the draft, I think Kenneth Grant would be a great value and an investment in the future for them whenever Jordan Davis inevitably walks in free agency. So I think that would be a great value for Philadelphia, and it feels like a very Eagles pick to me.
Well, the Eagles also love a heavy rotation on the interior D-line.
Yeah.
And that was Milton Williams behind Davis and Carter. And now replacing Milton Williams with Kenneth Grant. That's a dream scenario right there.
Yeah. So, we went through the entire first round of the NFL draft just now. Guys, let's go around the frames. Let's quickly ask, are there any, starting with Jorge, are there any real shocks that you saw from that first round?
I think the tight ends slipping was probably the one that kind of caught me off guard the most.
Yeah,
I do like I think getting Jahad Campbell was bold for the Falcons, but I think, considering the situation there, like that was discussed earlier, that was probably the best move to make if you're going to make a bold move that could actually pay dividends. I'm loving Colston Loveland to the Rams. I think that is going to be, as well as Tyler Warren to the Chargers. I think both Los Angeles teams are going to just feast here. Especially Tyler Warren. Like you look at the situation for the Chargers. Ladd McConkey is the number one there. Warren is potentially the number two if he's drafted there, because no disrespect to Mike Williams, but he's Mike Williams. Like
he's absolutely the number two immediately.
Right. So
Williams
is going to be there. So I really like that. But the tight end slipping, but where they slip to, I think is even more shocking.
Hey, before we move off of you, Jorge, real quick, I got a question. Well, Kyle has a question for you in the chat. IDP-wise, who's your first-round rookie that you think will give the most production in year one? Is it Travis Hunter with the intriguing skill to possibly play both sides? Which, if we're talking about IDP, I think we need to focus on what they would give you on the defensive side of the ball. So is it Travis Hunter the corner, or is, based on how our mock draft played out, who would be your number one defensive player for fantasy football purposes, assuming things play out the way that we have them?
Right. So like Sleeper, for example, is a platform that is very liberal with giving dual eligibility to players, whether it's linebacker or defensive lineman, or sometimes you'll see wide receiver and corner. And if they were to give Travis Hunter wide receiver and cornerback eligibility in a mixed offense and IDP Dynasty League,
that would be wild.
He jumps Ashton Janty to 2.
Yeah.
He jumps over Janty, and you give Travis Hunter that number one rookie pick, because getting wide receiver stats at the cornerback position or defensive back position is ridiculous. And with the depth at the running back position, you could easily come back in the next round and get a serviceable running back and then some.
If that's not the case, though, and it's just one or the other, is it Abdul Carter at that point, or is it somebody else?
I personally believe there's always depth you can find at the linebacker position in free agency. So I'm always one of those guys who's like, let me get the elite defensive lineman if there is one, and really stockpile those guys, because you look at the IDP positions, and Nate, you'll probably co-sign on this. I think that you have your elite edge rushers or defensive linemen, and then that you fall off that cliff really quickly. And then you just basically start like rotating those guys in and out of your defensive line position. You really want to get those elite players first, because then you can get these linebackers. Like you get the linebackers who are like the top 12 linebackers. Those guys are super elite. They're going to put up, double-digit points, maybe close to the 20s per week. And then you get like everybody else it's really quite variable, where they're all like within like 3 decimal points of each other in terms of like who's a linebacker 2 and who's a linebacker 3. And then you have like situation dependent situations. So yeah, I would go Abdul Carter, but if he wasn't available, then it's Jahad Campbell for me at the linebacking position.
And real quick, before we move off anything else, guys, there is breaking news that happened during the show. Tyler Lockett is going to the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, the Tennessee Titans are literally the retirement home for old receivers. This is look
D-Hop.
at Julio Jones, look at Randy Moss, look at D-Hop, look at whoever. We love Tyler Lockett. He's going to catch a few balls and then immediately fall down and be a great outlet for Cam Ward. But for fantasy purposes, it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah. And so Jamie
Just my immediate reaction personally.
And so Jamie also asked us, who's one guy you'd all like to see go in the first round if they could go around the horn?
I'll start. My favorite non-first round player in our mock draft that I'd love to see go in the first round is Travion Henderson. Right. I technically have Omarion Hampton as my RB2 just because of the projected draft capital that he's going to get, and for fantasy purposes that does matter. But I think that Travion Henderson is actually the better all-around running back over Omarion Hampton, and I'd love to see him get the draft capital, but I don't know if it'll happen.
All right, let's
go, for me, I want to see Bashal Tutin out of Virginia Tech.
Oh, shit,
yeah. It's a beast for running back. So elusive, so explosive. This guy, I understand it's the ACC or whatever, but I don't care. This guy, he's going to be a great value in rookie drafts. And
So, Aiden?
Yeah. Like one dream guy would like this is a big brain guy for me. Like Cam Skadabo. I love the way he runs. I love his play style. So I'd probably go with, it's probably not going to happen, but I would go with Cam Skadabo if I wanted to get see a guy go in there.
So I love the direction we're taking this, because now we're just talking about guys we would just
running
like
backs.
to see. We would just like to
All
guys we would like to see go in the first round, which I think is a good fun exercise. Just for chaos purposes. Let's see what happens if Jackson Dart goes in the first round, because maybe the league has learned its mistake a couple years ago when Zach Wilson went way too high, and Jackson Dart shows a little bit too much Zach Wilson for my taste to be a first round quarterback. But you know what? I'm a chaos agent. I love the idea of having this guy who thrived on the play action and didn't really have to make super advanced reads, all of a sudden now being a first round quarterback. So for me, it just feels like the most Mickey Loomis thing that's going to happen tomorrow night. Let's go ahead. Let's get the guy who didn't really have to read defenses that much and thrived on play action. And you know what? Let's put him with a first-year head coach, and let's watch the world burn, baby.
Jorge, you'll be proud of me. I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go Kane Medrano, linebacker out of UCLA.
Oh,
if you look at the RAS, relative athletic score, his 9.83 is 56th rank out of 3,182 linebackers since they started grading dating back to 1987. He's not real big. He's 225 pounds, which let's go back a couple of years, Jorge. Remember JOK? Oh, he's too small. He won't make a spot, this and that. And I know that's not the best comparison for a person who I want to be dynamic, but those the most recency that I can think of without racking my brain. But he just seen everything I've read so far. Sideline to sideline, he's hyper aggressive. He's definitely he's gritty, I guess is the right way to say that. And I feel like he's just one of those other linebackers. Not going to compare him to Ivan Pace because, that was my love child before. But each year I'm going to have a linebacker that I'm going to hold on to, and I'm going to wait and see where he goes. And if it just happens to be one of those spots where he gets a chance, second man up, week 6, week 7, and all of a sudden there's your IDP linebacker that you didn't have to take Jai Campbell to get. You could wait and sneak him in. Don't remember that for our IDP draft.
Is he a white guy?
Don't remember.
What?
Is he a white guy?
Is he
his skin tone?
He's Caucasian.
Whenever he fills out a job application, does he check Caucasian in the box? I'm just curious because you used the word gritty, and if he was a white guy, I was going to say, okay, he's one of the guys. He brings his lunch pail to work every day. First guy in, last guy out. You were.
Is he deceptively fast?
He's a coach's son. You were kind of starting to rattle off some white guy stereotypes, and I was just going to keep it rolling if he was a white guy. But
so he missed that one.
No, I was trying. I don't know. I think the easy answer is yes, but I don't really know.
It's 2025 though. You got to be careful.
Well, here's the thing. Look, Google who he is.
Identify as a giraffe, so.
And you will see I don't know how to answer that because I don't know the answer. I want to say yes, but he has Mahomes-esque curl.
Oh man.
And he's a little he could be very light skinned. Because he's definitely not dark skinned, but
is someone looking
it's
it up?
It's all right. I didn't just know if you know what you're
So
I'm gonna look who his parents are.
You laid off a couple white guy stereotypes, and I was just gonna roll some more off if it made sense.
So before we get
I'm so glad you didn't know and you were confused, though. That made this so much more fun.
Hit the frames after dark. Yeah, I love it.
Let's end the conversation.
Can I give a shout out?
Like Lad McConkey, he was first guy in, last guy out. He brings his lunch pail to work every day.
Lad McConkey's clearly
I guarantee you his dad was a coach. It's just what they
his
do.
dad was a coach.
Let me give a shout out real quick, and quickly pivot off of this awesomely not.
Yeah, we're about to get canceled.
For real
though.
Thanks a lot, Drew.
I just think it shows that I don't. Hey, it shows that I don't see color. So you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Good advice.
I don't know. I don't see that. I see gritty
that's like the key line of a low key racist is I don't see color. So you're not helping yourself.
That's what a racist does.
Rhett, you kind of sticky right here, Rhett. You allow this to happen after dark when I go to sleep.
You should have got us out of here 10 minutes ago. I don't know what you're doing, Rhett.
Getting late.
Let me try to end this on a really, really positive note. Dorian Davis is he is a defensive back from Austin P. We had him on Shoot the Gap. He is an NFL draft prospect.
You should absolutely go in the first round.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He played, at Towson a couple seasons ago, just put up really great numbers. Really great guy. We had him on Shoot the Gap. JT and we interviewed him. It's our first time interviewing an NFL draft prospect, and just listening to, him talk about more of the mental, preparation during the process of, working out and doing the workouts and going to the invites, the pro days and whatnot. And how well that somebody has to really keep it together upstairs versus, just worrying about the raw athletics, that come along with training for the NFL draft. Just want to give a shout out to Dorian and saying, we hope you get drafted this weekend and we're wishing you nothing but luck.
Yeah.
100%, man. 100%.
And so let's go ahead and get out of here before Drew baits us into anything else that's going to be out of pocket. But before we
Clearly
get out of
too
here,
late.
guys,
We're gonna
just
get
a
started,
reminder
man.
that our boy JT Brew will be hosting the first round tomorrow night, and then rounds 2 and 3 on Friday night of the NFL draft. All the picks you'll be able to lock in with us here at Fantasy and Frames and have a good time. And you
I'm
may or
bringing
may
my
not.
lunch ball.
Oh boy. Okay.
Drew will bring his lunch pail. All of our analysts will have it between the ears tomorrow night, and we are going to have some of the best draft coverage you're going to find in the fantasy space. And with fantasy and with Fourth and Frames, we will be back next Wednesday reacting to the results of the NFL draft on the offensive side of the ball with our special guest and friend of the show, D-Bro, Derek Brown of Fantasy Pros, and our long lost OG Fourth and Frames host with me and Drew, Chris Battistel, also in the house, with Shoot the Gap coming through with their reactions of the defensive side of the ball from the NFL draft. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here. It's past y'all's bedtime tonight, viewers.
Yeah.
I'm at Armando Sports. He is at Nate Markham. He is at Drew 3MR. He is at Jorge B. Edwards. And he is at A. Weingartner 13. I'm Rhett Manuel. We are Shoot the Gap. We are Fourth and Frames. Toodles.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.